Norma and friends, thank you very much for that very kind reception. And it's a great pleasure to be here at Spring Conference and have the chance to speak to you and also to meet delegates over the last couple of days and speak to them about their policy ideas for the manifesto. Of course, it's always a bit odd to be a Miliband at party conferences, and that's because of my famous older brother, David. We often get confused with each other, actually, and I suppose my low moment was at party conference last year, and some of you may have been there. Sky News, the people from Sky News, produced a Top Trumps pack comparing different politicians, and I have to say I was pretty upset when I saw the Top Trumps pack, because there were David and I, different Top Trumps cards, and he beat me on parliamentary skills, and I thought, well, he's been in Parliament longer than me. He beat me on charisma, and I thought, well, okay, that's a fair enough judgment. But then I really thought these guys were biased because he beat me on looks as well. But then I knew actually it was a Tory conspiracy, because George Osborne beat us on all three counts, and that's simply not credible. I want to talk to you today about the tasks we face between now and the next manifesto, the road to the next manifesto. And my argument today is that our values are not just right for the years since 1997, but are right for now and are right for the years ahead. But to turn our values into victory, there are some things we need to do between now and then. And the first thing we need to do is to show that what we're delivering is about putting our Labour values into practice. Now, you remember at these conferences, John Prescott used to stand up with a pledge card, and he used to say, here are the 5 pledges, you should go out onto the doorstep. Well, you'll be pleased to hear I'm not going to try and do that today because I'm no John Prescott. But the thing I would say to you, and Gordon talked about this yesterday, is we need to go out there, and this starts with the Cabinet and ministers and MPs and councillors and party members, and show what Labour values are delivering in practice. The shortest NHS waiting times in history. Out-of-hours GP access, which Alan was just talking about. Neighbourhood policing in every area. 700,000 additional homes by 2010. And 600 more children's centres this year, on the way to 3,500 by 2010. Children's centres and achievements that would never have happened under a Tory government, and we need to go out and tell people that over the coming months and years. So that's the first thing we need to do. And we need to say that these achievements didn't happen by accident. They happened because we were putting Labour values into practice up and down the country. But general elections aren't won and lost on simply the promises that you've kept. They're about addressing the challenges of the future as well. And we need to show how Labour values can address those challenges that we face. Globalisation. Globalisation creates big winners, and it also creates losers, people who lose out because of their skills, but they don't have the skills, because their jobs might go elsewhere. Now, there are 2 views you can take about what the response should be to globalisation. There's the Tory view, which says it's about a small state. The only way we can succeed as a country in an era of globalisation is by cutting back and being indifferent to people's fates. We need to go out and say there's a different view. There's a Labour view. Globalisation makes the case for government more, not less, important. For example, about investing in the early years, in education, in our universities, because the only credible industrial policy in the future is an education policy. But it's not just about investing in education. We also need to address the challenge, which is part of globalisation, of migration. And friends, we have to talk about migration, and we have to do so in a Labour way, as Jackie Smith and Liam Byrne have been doing. And what is the Labour way of talking about migration? It's about saying that we benefit from diversity and migration, and there's nowhere more appropriate to say that than here in Birmingham today. It's about recognising that there needs to be fairness and Labour values in the system. But it's also about recognising that we need to enforce minimum standards at the workplace. And that means enforcing the minimum wage, employment rights, and it also means dealing with the issue of agency workers, as Gordon said yesterday. But we don't just stand for people being able to get on at work. We also stand for people's life outside work and for doing better and enabling people to do better for themselves outside the workplace. And the challenges now are very different from 10 years ago. 10 years ago, and in the 1990s, Harriet led the campaign to say that we should do more to enable families to balance looking after their kids and going out to work. And we need to do more in this area. But today, the challenge is even greater, because we have to show that we can help people cope, not just with looking after their kids and going out to work, but also looking after their elderly relatives as well. And so, friends, the welfare state needs to evolve again. It needs to evolve again to show that we can address people's issues around social care, and that needs to be a bigger priority in the years ahead. And social care is an intergenerational issue. It's about how we show fairness to the generations. And there's another issue, which is a central issue, of course, for our time, and that's climate change, which is also an intergenerational issue. And our challenge in the coming years is a very big challenge. We have to show that climate change is not simply an add-on to policy, but is a central part of everything we do. Economic policy, social policy, transport policy, every policy needs to reflect climate change. And the challenge really came home to me recently when I was in Yorkshire and I was addressing a manifesto policy forum. And I was talking to a young student, and I said to him, I suppose the thing is that you'll be around in 2050 to see whether we meet our targets. And he said, you may not be, he said, but you're in a position to do something about it. And that is a huge responsibility for us, and a responsibility we know we need to fulfill. So we face challenges on the economy. We face challenges on social policy. We face challenges on climate change. And we also face a political challenge as well. You see, I think that things are different from 10 years ago here as well. Because people don't just expect that they can trust their politicians, the experts, in the way that they used to. People want a voice in the decisions that affect their lives. Some people say that it's bad today that people are skeptical about the decisions that politicians make or the experts make. I think they're wrong. The danger for us is that skepticism becomes cynicism. And the way that you stop that happening is by giving people a voice. And some people say, look, this debate about constitutional reform, it's very abstract, it's not of interest to most people. For me, and for Hazel Blears, who's leading this work, constitutional reform is about my constituents who come to me and say, why don't we have more control over the bus services that really matter to us? Constitutional reform is about policing. Why don't we have more control over policing and neighbourhood policing and what matters to us? Constitutional reform is about saying, how can we make a difference to our neighbourhood? So we need to address that political challenge as well, and that means more power for local government, more accountability through local government, so that local people, elected by local people, can make decisions about their communities. So we need to show that our values can meet the challenges ahead, and we need to do something else as well. We need to show how our values are different from those of our opponents. Now, the Tories realise that they can't say anymore there's no such thing as society. They realise they can't say that. They've got a new tune that they try and play. They say, we do believe in social justice, but it will all be taken care of by the voluntary sector. Now, I'm the Minister for the voluntary sector, and I see the difference the voluntary sector makes up and down our country, building a sense of community, campaigning for political change, and helping to deliver public services. But what I also know is that the voluntary sector themselves know that they do not want to be used as a cut-price alternative to the state. And friends, let's not be under any illusions that that is the Tories' agenda. Oliver Letwin, you may remember him, he's been put in charge of the Tories' manifesto. He's the man who said in 2001 we need to cut public spending by £35 billion. And he said something else more recently. He said that the voluntary sector could deliver services more cheaply than the public sector. That is the Tories' hidden agenda. So let's also go out and say to people that when the Tories claim to care about the issues that we really care about, that their commitment is half-hearted, it's skin-deep, and it's a cut-price alternative to decent public services in our country. So we need to show how our values are delivering in practice. We need to show how our values can meet the challenges of the future. And we need to show how our values are different from our opponents. But one other thing matters as well, friends, and that's idealism. We are the idealists in politics today. We are the people who say we should abolish child poverty in a generation. We are the people who believe in strong and decent public services. We are the people who can really tackle climate change because we understand the role for Europe and the role for collective action. We are the people who are committed to international debt and development. And the reason we should be confident about being idealists is because of the way we've changed this country in the last 10 years. You see, it's important to realize that the Tories are saying that they care about social justice and they care about public services and they care about international development. And the reason it's important to realize that is to ask, why are they saying it? They're saying it because you've changed the spirit of the times. You've reshaped the political map in the last 10 years, and you don't just see it in politics. If I'd said to you 10 years ago that HSBC, a bank in Canary Wharf, when there wasn't even a minimum wage 10 years ago, if I'd said to you that HSBC would be paying the living wage, you wouldn't have believed me. If I'd said to you 10 years ago that kids in my constituency would be coming up to me and asking about alternative energy and wind turbines, you wouldn't have believed me. If I'd said to you 10 years ago that the sixth biggest coffee supplier in Britain is a fair trade social enterprise, you wouldn't have believed me. Now, what does this tell us? It tells us that our values are right for the challenges of today, and our values are right for the spirit of the times. And the progressive opportunity is to seize that moment. Now, yesterday, when Gordon spoke, a young lady called Michaela asked a question of him. And she said, "I was 8 years old in 1997. Now, unusually for me, that made me feel old. But there's something very important about that and about Michaela's generation. My formative political experience was 1992. 1992 was an election of defeat. To have people in this party who only remember a Labour government is part of us being an idealistic party. So their role, the presence of young people, is incredibly important. And that spirit of idealism needs to infuse all the generations of this party. You see, when I've gone around the country, I've talked to you about the manifestos you really admire. 1945, which built the welfare state and the NHS. 1964 and 1966, which led the way on social equality. And 1997, which has reshaped the political map. So together, our challenge in the coming years is to create that manifesto again. So the message is today that we can only do this if we work together. Because the ideas can't just come from people up here, it has to come from this whole party. So let's go out and campaign in the May elections. Let's go out and take the argument to people about Labour values and what they can deliver in practice. Let's go out and show we can meet the future challenges we face. And let's go out and together devise a manifesto to win us a fourth term, a manifesto we can be proud of to build a country that we want to build.